So, you know that feeling you get when you donate to charity? That warm, fuzzy sensation like you've just hugged a puppy that also happens to be a tax deduction? It's a great feeling. You see a cause, you open your wallet, you do a good thing. Simple, right? Well, what if I told you that sometimes your donation, made with the best intentions, ends up funding a lavish lifestyle for someone who thinks nonprofit is just a suggestion? Yeah, it gets complicated. Today we're pulling back the curtain and exposing the top 10 corrupt charities in South Africa. It's a journey into a world where good intentions meet some very questionable accounting practices. Now let's be clear. The vast majority of people working in the charity sector are heroes. They are on the ground, doing the work, changing lives. But like any industry, it has its dark corners. And when you're dealing with money meant for the most vulnerable people in society, for children who need education, for families who need food, for communities devastated by disaster, transparency isn't just a buzzword, it's everything. It's the foundation of trust. Without it, the whole system crumbles. And the people who lose out are the ones who needed the help in the first place. So we have to ask the tough questions, we have to look at the books. This isn't about discouraging you from giving, not at all. It's about empowering you to give smarter. It's about making sure your hard-earned money actually does the good you want it to do. Think of this as your guide to navigating the sometimes murky waters of philanthropy in South Africa. We're going to name names, we're going to look at the reports, and we're going to unpack the scandals that have rocked some of the country's most well-known charitable organizations. It might get a little uncomfortable, but it's a conversation we need to have. So grab your popcorn or maybe a strong cup of coffee because things are about to get real. Alright, let's start with a big one. A name so universally recognized for aid that it's practically synonymous with helping, the Red Cross. When you see that iconic symbol, you think of disaster relief, blood drives, people in vests running towards a crisis, not away from it. It's a global beacon of hope. But here in South Africa, that beacon has been flickering, and at times it's been accused of being powered by some very dodgy wiring. The South African Red Cross Society has found itself tangled in some serious allegations of mismanagement that make you question everything. Reports have surfaced over the years that paint a pretty grim picture. We're talking about accusations of funds, generously donated by people like you and me to help victims of floods or fires, allegedly being misused. Imagine donating money to provide blankets for a family left homeless by a shack fire, only to find out later that the money might have been used to, I don't know, recarpet an office or fund a strategic planning retreat at a fancy hotel. These aren't just rumors whispered in hallways. These are concerns that have led to internal investigations and public outcry, casting a long shadow over the organization's work. The core of the issue seems to be a systemic problem with financial controls. It's like they were given the keys to a vault filled with public goodwill and cash, but someone forgot to install a proper lock, or maybe just left the key in the door with a sign saying "Help yourself." There have been claims of unauthorized expenditures, questionable procurement processes, and a general lack of oversight that allowed these problems to fester. It's the kind of stuff that makes accountants have nightmares and donors have second thoughts. When you look at the reports, you see a pattern. A crisis happens. The public responds with incredible generosity. And then, the questions begin. Where did the millions raised actually go? Why are there delays in getting aid to the people who desperately need it? And why does it seem like the administrative side of the organization is living a little too comfortably while beneficiaries are still waiting? It's a betrayal of trust on a massive scale because you're not just donating money, you're donating your faith in their ability to do the right thing. This is particularly painful because the Red Cross is supposed to be the gold standard. They are often the first on the scene, the ones we count on in our darkest hours. So when allegations of corruption and mismanagement surface here, it doesn't just damage their reputation, it erodes public trust in the entire charitable sector. It leaves a stain that's hard to wash out, and it forces us to ask, if we can't trust the Red Cross, who can we trust? It's a question that unfortunately, we'll be asking a lot today. Now this one hurts, it really does. You take one of the most beloved, respected, and iconic figures in human history, Nelson Mandela, a man whose name is a global symbol for freedom, forgiveness, and integrity, and you attach his name to a charity for children, the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. I mean, it doesn't get more pure-hearted than that, right? Donating to this fund feels like you're personally getting a high five from Mandela himself. It's supposed to be untouchable, a sacred trust. And yet, even this revered institution has not been immune to scandal. It's like finding out that Santa Claus has been fudging his expense reports. Over the years, the fund has faced its own share of scrutiny, with reports of financial irregularities that have raised some very uncomfortable questions. These aren't just minor accounting errors we're talking about. These are serious concerns about where millions of rands, intended to uplift and support the children of South Africa, have actually ended up. The very idea is heartbreaking. The problems often revolve around a lack of accountability and opaque financial reporting. Journalists and watchdog groups have tried to follow the money trail, and what they've often found is a confusing maze of transactions and a lack of clear, detailed breakdowns of how donations are spent. When you ask, "What percentage of my donation goes directly to the children?" you expect a clear, confident answer. Instead, what has sometimes emerged are vague statements and financial reports that seem to raise more questions than they answer. This lack of transparency is a huge red flag. For an organization bearing the name of a man who championed truth and reconciliation, the inability to be fully transparent with its own finances is a profound irony. It creates a breeding ground for suspicion. People start to wonder if the fund is more focused on preserving its own legacy and administrative structure than on its primary mission serving the children. It's a classic case of a charity potentially losing sight of its why. The damage here is twofold. First, and most obviously, any potential misuse of funds means that children who were supposed to benefit from Madiba's legacy are being failed. That is the ultimate tragedy. But second, it tarnishes the name of Nelson Mandela himself. It attaches the stain of scandal to a name that, for millions, represents the very best of humanity. It's a heavy burden for any organization to carry, and when they stumble, the fall is that much harder and the disappointment that much deeper. Alright, let's talk about Love Life. If you grew up in South Africa in the 2000s, you couldn't escape it. Their branding was everywhere. It was cool, it was edgy, it was hip. They were tackling the HIV/AIDS crisis head-on, targeting the youth with a message of safe sex and healthy living. On paper, it was exactly what the country needed, a bold, modern approach to a devastating epidemic. The goal was noble, the marketing was slick, and the funding they received was absolutely massive, both from the government and international donors. But with big money comes big scrutiny. And it wasn't long before controversies started bubbling to the surface. The main accusation leveled against Love Life was that there was a massive disconnect between their high-flying, expensive brand campaigns and their actual on-the-ground impact. Critics started asking, where is all this money going? They saw a huge budget, but they weren't seeing a proportional decline in HIV infection rates among the youth. The effectiveness of their entire model came into question. The spending habits of the organization became a major point of contention. There were reports of exorbitant salaries for top executives, lavish marketing budgets, and a top-heavy administrative structure that seemed to consume a huge chunk of the donations. It started to look less like a nimble, grassroots health initiative and more like a corporate marketing agency that just happened to have a social cause. The perception grew that they were more interested in building the Love Life brand than in changing behaviors and saving lives. This is a classic charity pitfall, falling in love with your own image. When you spend millions on billboards, TV ads, and celebrity endorsements, you have to be able to prove that it's working. For Love Life, that proof was often hard to find. The metrics were fuzzy. While they could easily report how many groundbreakers they had or how many events they held, tying that directly to a reduction in HIV rates was a much bigger challenge. And when you can't prove your impact, people start to suspect that their donations are just funding a very expensive PR campaign. The Love Life story is a cautionary tale about the importance of outcomes over outputs. It's not enough to just do things. A charity has to prove it's making a difference. It's a reminder that no matter how cool your logo is or how catchy your slogan is, if the money isn't reaching the problem in an effective way, you're failing. For many, Love Life became a symbol of well-intentioned but ultimately bloated and inefficient charitable work, a lesson in how not to spend hundreds of millions of rands. Ah, the national lottery, the dream of every South African who's ever been short on cash at the end of the month. You buy a ticket, you whisper a little prayer to the financial gods, and you dream of what you'd do with the winnings. But part of the deal, the thing that makes us all feel a little better about gambling, is the promise that a portion of the money goes to good causes. It's supposed to fund arts, culture, sports, and, most importantly, charities that help the needy. It's lotto funded, which sounds so official and wonderful. Well, what happens when the people in charge of giving out that good cause money decide the best cause is themselves, their friends and their families. That's the scandal that has engulfed the National Lotteries Commission, or NLC. This isn't just a case of a few bad apples. We're talking about systemic, widespread corruption that has been investigated by journalists and the Special Investigating Unit, the SIU. It's a story of greed that is almost cartoonishly evil. It's like the Grinch didn't just steal Christmas. He stole the funding for the old age home and the drug rehab center too. The scheme, as uncovered by investigators, was often brazenly simple. A non-profit organization, sometimes a legitimate one, and sometimes a complete sham set up by insiders, would apply for a grant from the NLC for a specific project, say, building a new community hall or a rehabilitation center. The NLC would approve a multi-million rand grant, but instead of the money going to build the project, a huge chunk of it would be siphoned off and funneled back to NLC officials and their cronies through a web of dodgy contractors and middlemen. We've seen the devastating results. Journalists have exposed half-built, crumbling structures that were meant to be state-of-the-art facilities. We've seen projects that received millions in funding but exist only on paper. We're talking about money meant to help recovering drug addicts being used to buy luxury homes. Money meant for impoverished rural communities being used to purchase high-end cars. It is a level of corruption that is breathtaking in its audacity and absolutely devastating in its impact. This isn't just a financial scandal, it's a moral catastrophe. The NLC was entrusted with a public resource, a river of money generated by the hopes of ordinary people, and tasked with directing it to the most deserving corners of our society. Instead, a network of corrupt individuals turned it into their own personal piggy bank. They didn't just steal money, they stole hope. They stole opportunities. They stole the chance for a better life from the very people the lottery was supposed to help. It's a betrayal of the public trust of the highest order. If you ask any South African to name a charity they trust, chances are the name Gift of the Givers will come up. And for good reason. For decades, this organization, led by the tireless Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, has been a force of nature. Wherever there's a disaster, a flood, a fire, a drought, they are there. They show up with water, with food, with medical supplies, with helicopters. They are the cavalry, the real-life avengers of disaster relief, and their reputation for the most part is sterling. However, no organization, no matter how beloved, is completely immune to questions, especially when they handle such vast sums of money from public donations. While Gift of the Givers has never faced the kind of systemic corruption allegations we've seen elsewhere, concerns have been raised over the years, primarily centered around the issue of transparency. Because they operate at such a fast pace and on such a massive scale, tracking every rand can be a challenge, both for them and for outside observers. The main point of concern for some watchdog groups and journalists has been the need for more detailed and publicly accessible financial reporting. When a disaster strikes and Gift of the Givers puts out a call for donations, the public responds with overwhelming generosity, pouring millions into their bank accounts. The question that follows is, how exactly is that money being spent? People want to see more than just photos of trucks delivering aid. They want to see the line items. How much was spent on fuel, on supplies, on salaries, on logistics? Dr. Suleiman and the organization have often responded to these queries by pointing to their incredible track record of delivery. Their argument, essentially, is look at the work we do. And it's a powerful argument. It's hard to argue with a team that's actively saving lives on the ground. They maintain that the speed required for disaster response doesn't always allow for meticulous, real-time accounting that can be instantly published. They prioritize getting the aid out the door first and dealing with the paperwork later. This creates a dilemma for the donor. On one hand, you have an organization with an unparalleled reputation for getting things done. On the other, you have the fundamental principle of charitable giving, which demands transparency and accountability. It highlights a tension that exists in the sector. Can an organization be highly effective without being fully transparent in the way that satisfies financial watchdogs? For Gift of the Givers, their legacy of action often speaks louder than any financial report, but the questions, for some, will always remain. Operation Hunger. The name itself is a mission statement. It's powerful, direct, and evokes a sense of urgency. For decades, it was one of South Africa's flagship charities, a titan in the fight against malnutrition and poverty. In the 1980s and 90s, it was a household name, raising huge sums of money with the clear and noble goal of feeding the nation's hungry. The public believed in their work, and they donated generously, trusting that their money was going directly to put food on the tables of those in need. But as the years went on, that trust began to erode, plagued by persistent and damaging reports that the funds weren't always reaching their intended beneficiaries. It's the most basic fear of any donor. You give money for food, but the people remain hungry. Allegations of gross mismanagement, internal strife, and financial irregularities began to surface, casting a dark cloud over the organization's incredible legacy. The hunger they were supposed to be fighting was now overshadowed by a hunger for answers and accountability. The stories that emerged were deeply troubling. There were reports from the ground, from communities that were supposed to be receiving aid, that the food parcels were inconsistent, smaller than promised, or sometimes didn't arrive at all. Meanwhile, questions were being asked about the organization's administrative costs. How could an organization with such a singular, clear mission be struggling so much with the simple logistics of getting food from point A to point B? This led to a significant loss of public confidence and, crucially, a drop in funding. Major corporate donors who had once been the lifeblood of Operation Hunger began to pull away, concerned about the reputational risk and the lack of clear, verifiable impact. The organization went through several leadership changes and restructuring efforts in an attempt to right the ship, but the damage to its brand was severe. It became a case study in how quickly a charity's reputation, built over decades, can unravel. The saga of Operation Hunger serves as a stark reminder that good intentions are not enough. A charity, especially one dealing with a life-or-death issue like hunger, must be built on a foundation of impeccable logistics, transparent accounting, and unwavering accountability. If you promise to feed someone, you have to be able to prove that the food arrived. For Operation Hunger, the failure to consistently do so led to its decline, leaving a vacuum in the fight against poverty and a cautionary tale for all who followed. If there's one charity that is guaranteed to pull at your heartstrings, it's the Reach for a Dream Foundation. Their mission is one of pure, unadulterated kindness, to grant the wishes of children suffering from life-threatening illnesses. They give these kids and their families a moment of joy, a ray of sunshine in the darkest of times, a trip to the seaside, a chance to meet a hero, a new laptop. It's about creating beautiful memories. The work is so emotionally resonant that it feels, honestly, a bit cynical to even question it. And to be clear, for the most part, Reach for a Dream has a wonderful reputation for doing exactly what it promises. They have fulfilled thousands upon thousands of dreams, and the joy they bring is undeniable. However, like any organization that handles public money, they are not entirely shielded from controversy. Over the years, isolated incidents and publicized cases have served as a reminder that even in the most heartwarming of charities, the potential for financial mismanagement can exist. While there hasn't been a massive systemic scandal on the level of the NLC, there have been publicized instances that have raised eyebrows. These often relate to the actions of individuals within the organization, rather than a flaw in the entire system. For example, a regional manager might be accused of misusing funds, or questions might be raised about the procurement of a specific high-value dream. These cases, when they hit the media, can be incredibly damaging precisely because the organization's work is so personal. The challenge for a charity like this is that even a single case of mismanagement can feel like a profound betrayal. When you donate money to help a sick child meet their favorite rugby player, you have a zero-tolerance policy for that money being used for anything else. The idea that even a single rand could be skimmed off to pay for an unauthorized expense is honestly just abhorrent. It tarnishes the purity of the mission and introduces a seed of doubt into the donor's mind. These isolated cases force the organization to be hyper-vigilant about its internal controls and governance. It shows that having a beautiful mission isn't enough. You need ironclad financial systems to protect that mission. Each publicized incident, however small in the grand scheme of their overall work, acts as a stress test for their accountability. It's a reminder to the public and to the organization itself that the dream they are selling can only be sustained through absolute, unwavering integrity. Building a hospital, especially a world-class hospital for children, is a monumental undertaking. It requires vision, dedication, and honestly, an absolutely staggering amount of money. This is the world of the Children's Hospital Trust, which is the primary fundraiser for the iconic Red Cross War Memorial Children's Hospital in Cape Town. Their job is to raise the funds needed for new buildings, cutting-edge equipment, and of course, vital research. They are, in essence, the financial engine that keeps one of Africa's top pediatric hospitals running and growing. Given the scale of their fundraising, we're talking hundreds of millions of rands for major capital projects, the need for impeccable financial stewardship is paramount. The trust has largely maintained a strong reputation for professionalism and transparency, publishing detailed annual reports and undergoing rigorous audits. They are the big leagues of fundraising, and for the most part they operate with the expected level of corporate governance. But, even in the most well-run ships, rough seas can reveal potential weaknesses. Controversies or concerns related to the trust are rarely about outright corruption, but more about the nuanced and complex world of large-scale project financing and donor relations. For instance, questions might arise during an audit about specific expenditures or procurement processes for a multi-million rand piece of medical equipment. Were 3 quotes obtained? Was the supplier chosen fairly? These are the kinds of granular technical questions that auditors are paid to ask, and sometimes their findings can create uncomfortable headlines. Furthermore, there can be public debate about the trust's priorities. When they launch a massive campaign for a new wing or a specialized unit, some might question if those funds could be better used for more basic primary healthcare elsewhere. This isn't an allegation of corruption, but rather a debate about strategy and allocation of scarce resources. It highlights the pressure on the trust to not only raise money effectively, but also to justify its spending priorities to a wide range of stakeholders, from mega donors to the general public. Ultimately, for an organization like the Children's Hospital Trust, maintaining public confidence is a constant process of transparent reporting and justification. Any note in an audit finding, any public controversy over a tender, or any debate about their strategic direction must be handled with extreme care. They are the guardians of a massive public investment in children's health, and they have to continuously prove that they are worthy of that trust, not just through slick brochures, but through clean audits and clear, defensible decision-making. In a country with such deep inequality as South Africa, the work of organizations like Food Forward SA is absolutely critical. Their model is brilliant in its simplicity and efficiency. They rescue surplus food from the supply chain, from farmers, manufacturers, and retailers, and redistribute it to hundreds of smaller community organizations that feed people on the ground. They are a logistics and distribution network for good, fighting hunger while also reducing food waste. It's a win-win. The very nature of their work, however, creates unique challenges for transparency and accountability. They are a middleman, a massive conduit through which tons and tons of food flows. This makes tracking and reporting a highly complex task. While they are not primarily handling cash donations for food purchase, they are handling donated goods of immense value, and the public and their partner organizations trust them to distribute it equitably and efficiently. Concerns or issues that have been raised about Food Forward SA typically revolve around this complex distribution chain. For example, questions may arise from one of their beneficiary organizations about the consistency or quality of the food they receive. Is the distribution fair across all provinces and all partners? Are some larger, more established organizations getting preferential treatment over smaller, more remote ones? These are difficult logistical and ethical questions. Another area of scrutiny is reporting. How do you accurately measure the impact of donated food? You can report on the tonnage of food rescued and the number of organizations served, but translating that into number of meals provided or people fed can involve estimates and averages that are open to interpretation and criticism. When they tell their corporate food donors that their surplus stock fed a certain number of people, they need to have robust data to back that up, which is a constant operational challenge. The key for Food Forward SA is to maintain the trust of both ends of their chain, the corporate donors who provide the food and the community organizations who distribute it. Any perceived issue in their distribution model, any complaint about unfairness, or any question about the accuracy of their impact reporting can damage that trust. They must constantly invest in their logistics, their data collection, and their communication to ensure that everyone involved believes the food is, indeed, moving forward to where it's needed most. We end with another name that carries immense moral weight in South Africa and around the world, Desmond Tutu, the Archbishop. A Nobel laureate, A champion of truth and reconciliation, a beacon of integrity and joyful defiance. The Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation, co-founded by the man himself, carries on his legacy by tackling the HIV and TB epidemics through pioneering research, treatment, and community engagement. Like the Mandela Fund, its name alone commands respect and inspires trust. The foundation is a major player in the public health space, receiving significant funding from international bodies, governments, and private donors to conduct its vital work. It operates at the intersection of high-level academic research and on-the-ground community healthcare, a complex and expensive endeavor. With this scale of operation and funding, it naturally comes under the same scrutiny as any major recipient of public and donor funds. While not plagued by the kind of corruption scandals we've discussed earlier, the foundation has had to navigate the complex world of grant management and financial reporting. Allegations or concerns, when they do arise, are often highly technical. They might relate to the administration of a specific multi-million-dollar grant from an international donor. Did the foundation meet all the incredibly detailed reporting requirements? Was every cent of the funding used in strict accordance with the grant stipulations? Any deviation can lead to questions or even audits from funders. For example, a donor might specify that funds can only be used for research personnel and not for community outreach materials. If there's an overlap or a gray area in how the money was spent, it can create an issue. These are not typically cases of anyone enriching themselves, but rather of the immense administrative burden that comes with managing large, restricted grants. The paperwork and bureaucracy can be overwhelming, and any slip-up can be perceived as a mismanagement of funds. The Desmond Tutu HIV Foundation, therefore, has the dual pressure of not only producing world-class research and health outcomes, but also maintaining world-class financial administration. They are guardians of a precious legacy. Any concern about how funds are used, no matter how small or technical, risks casting a shadow on the incredible work they do and, by extension, on the untarnished name of the Archbishop himself. It's a constant balancing act between impactful work and the impeccable bookkeeping required to sustain it. So, there you have it, a tour through some of the most challenging and uncomfortable stories in South Africa's charity sector. It's a lot to take in, and it's easy to feel a bit cynical after all that. You might be thinking, well, should I just give up on donating altogether? And the answer is a resounding no. The need is still there. The good work is still being done by thousands of incredible, honest organizations. But this journey wasn't about discouraging giving, it was about encouraging thinking. It was about turning blind faith into informed trust. The single most important takeaway from all of this is to do your homework. Before you click that donate button or open your wallet, take 10 minutes to become a mini investigator. Look up the organization. Can you easily find their financial statements on their website? Do they have a clean audit record? Are they transparent about what percentage of your donation goes to their programs versus administrative costs? Reputable organizations are proud of their transparency and make this information easy to find. If you have to dig for it, or if it's impossible to find, that's a red flag. Ultimately, your donation is your voice. It's your investment in the kind of country you want to live in. By choosing to support organizations that are transparent, accountable, and can prove their impact, you are sending a powerful message. You're rewarding good governance and starving the bad actors of the resources they need to operate. You are helping to build a stronger, more trustworthy, and more effective charitable sector for everyone. So please, keep giving, keep caring, but do it with your eyes wide open. Stay informed, and make your donations count.